Hello and welcome to An Interview in History. This week, we'll be talking with that well-known author of the mystery series, Sherlock Holmes, and that's Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. Good afternoon, Sir Arthur. It's an honor to have this opportunity to speak with you. Let's start by talking about your early life. Could you share some details about your upbringing and how it influenced your writing career?
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I was born on May 22nd, 1859, in Edinburgh, Scotland. My family was of Irish descent, and my father, Charles Doyle, was a chronic alcoholic, which made life quite difficult at times. Despite this, he was a talented artist and provided some early artistic influence. My mother, Mary, was a remarkable storyteller and imbued in me a love of literature and narrative. After a while, my family was scattered because of my father's growing alcoholism. My siblings and I were temporarily housed across Edinburgh. I lodged with Mary Burton, the aunt of a friend, while studying at Newington Academy. Soon the family came together again and lived in squalid tenement flats. My father died in 1893 in Crichton Royal, Dumfries, after many years of psychiatric illness. Beginning at an early age throughout my life, I wrote letters to my mother.
How were you supported then?
I was supported by my wealthy uncles. I was sent to England, to the Jesuit preparatory school, Hodder Place, Stonyhurst, in Lancashire at the age of 9. I went on to Stonyhurst College, which I attended until 1875. While I was not unhappy at Stonyhurst, I do not have any fond memories of it because the school was run on medieval principles. The only subjects covered were rudiments, rhetoric, Euclidean geometry, algebra, and the classics. I found the school harsh. Instead of compassion and warmth, it favored the threat of corporal punishment and ritual humiliation. I was then sent to the Jesuit school Stella Matutina in Fieldrich, Austria. My family decided that I should spend a year there in order to perfect my German and broaden my academic horizons.
Then moving on to your personal life, can you tell us about your wife and children?
I married my first wife, Louisa Hawkins, in 1885. Louisa, or Tooey, as I affectionately called her, was a gentle and supportive partner. We had 2 children together, my daughter Mary and a son Kingsley. Unfortunately, Louisa fell ill with tuberculosis, and her health declined over the years. She passed away in 1906.
That must have been a difficult time for you.
Indeed it was. However, during Louisa's illness, I had met and formed a deep bond with Jean Leckie, who became my second wife in 1907. Jean was a remarkable woman, full of life and energy. Together we had 3 children, Dennis, Adrian, and Jean. Jean brought immense joy and stability to my life, and our family was full of love and happiness.
How did your family influence your work?
My family was my anchor. Despite the demands of my career, I always made time for them. Their support and love provided the balance I needed to pursue my writing and other interests. My children, in particular, inspired many of my stories. Their curiosity and imagination were a constant source of ideas.
Let's talk about your medical career.
Very well. I studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh's Medical School. I graduated with a Bachelor of Medicine and Master of Surgery degrees from the University of Edinburgh in 1881. I was ship's surgeon on the SS Mayumba during the voyage to the West African coast. I completed my Doctorate of Medicine degree in 1885. I then partnered with my former classmate, George Turnavine Budd, in a medical practice in Plymouth, but our relationship proved difficult, and I soon left to set up an independent practice. The practice was not successful. I'm a staunch supporter of compulsory vaccination and wrote several articles advocating the practice and denouncing the views of anti-vaccinators. In early 1891, I embarked on the study of ophthalmology in Vienna. I had previously studied at the Portsmouth Eye Hospital in order to qualify to perform eye tests and prescribe glasses. Vienna had been suggested by my friend Vernon Morris as a place to spend 6 months and train to be an eye surgeon. But I found it too difficult to understand the German medical terms being used in my classes in Vienna, and soon quit my studies there. For the rest of my 2-month stay in Vienna, I pursued other activities, such as ice skating with my wife Louisa and drinking with Brinsley Richard of the London Times. Your medical training played a significant role in the creation of Sherlock Holmes. Could you elaborate on how your experiences as a medical student and physician influenced your writing?
Yes, indeed. My medical training had a profound impact on my writing. While I was at the University of Edinburgh, I was fortunate to be taught by Dr. Joseph Bell. He had an extraordinary ability to deduce details about his patients just by observing them closely. This keen sense of observation and logical deduction inspired the character of Sherlock Holmes. My own experiences as a physician, dealing with various patients and solving medical puzzles, further shaped the analytical aspects of Holmes's character. So let's talk about Sherlock Holmes. When did you start writing about him? I initially struggled to find a publisher. My first work featuring Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, called A Study in Scarlet, was written in 3 weeks and was accepted for publication by Wardlock and Company on 20 November 1886. The piece appeared a year later in the Beaton's Christmas Annual and received good reviews in the Scotsman and Glasgow Herald. Holmes was partially modelled on my former university teacher Joseph Bell. I wrote a letter to Bell and told him that it's most certainly to you that I owe Sherlock Holmes. Round the centre of deduction and inference and observation which I heard you inculcate, I tried to build up a man. It's no wonder that after the study of such a character I used and amplified his methods, when in later life I tried to build up a scientific detective who solved cases on his own merits and not through the folly of the criminal. Didn't Robert Louis Stevenson say something about that? He did. He said he was able to recognize the strong similarity between Joseph Bell and Sherlock Holmes, and he also complimented me on my very ingenious and very interesting adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and said, "Can this be my old friend Joe Bell?" Other authors sometimes suggest additional influences. For instance, Edgar Allan Poe's character C. Auguste Dupin, who is mentioned disparagingly by Holmes in A Study in Scarlet. Then where did Dr. Watson come from? Dr. Watson owes his surname, but not any other obvious characteristic, to a Portsmouth Medical College of mine, Dr. James Watson. Beyond Sherlock Holmes, you wrote many other works, including historical novels and science fiction. How do you view your broader literary legacy? Well, Sherlock Holmes was undoubtedly the most enduring aspect of my legacy. I take great pride in my broader body of work. My historical novels, such as The White Company and Sir Nigel, are close to my heart. I also enjoyed exploring other genres like science fiction with The Lost World. I hope that readers recognize the diversity of my work and see me not just as the creator of Holmes, but as a versatile writer with a wide range of interests. At one point you were going to kill off Holmes. Why? My attitude towards my most famous creation was ambivalent. I wrote to my mother saying, "I think of slaying Holmes, and winding him up for good and all. He takes my mind from better things." My mother responded, "You won't, you can't, you mustn't." In an attempt to deflect publishers' demands for more Holmes stories, I raised my price to a level intended to discourage them, but found they were willing to pay even large sums I asked. As a result, I became one of the best-paid authors of my time. Wow, that's amazing. Let's switch up the conversation a bit. I understand you were quite interested in sports. Can you expound on that? Well, while living in South Sea, the seaside resort near Portsmouth,
I played football as a goalkeeper for Portsmouth Association Football Club. I was a keen cricketer, and between 1899 and 1907 I played 10 first-class matches for Marylebone Cricket Club. I founded the Undershaw Rifle Club at my home, constructing a 100-yard range and providing shooting for local men. I was a champion of miniature rifle clubs. I was an amateur boxer, a keen golfer, played billiards, and learned to ski in Switzerland when skiing was little known. My goodness, I had no clue you were so into sport. Life, it turns out, is definitely more clever and adaptable than anyone had ever supposed. So, what do you do to clear your head when it seems you can't go on? When spirits are low, when the day appears dark, when work becomes monotonous, when hope hardly seems worth having, just mount a bicycle and go out for a spin down the road, without thought on anything but the ride you were taking. Well said. Now, looking back, what do you hope future generations will remember most about you and your contributions to literature? I hope future generations will remember me as a storyteller who brought joy, intrigue, and inspiration through my writing, whether through the adventures of Sherlock Holmes or my other works. I aimed to entertain and provoke thought. If my stories have stood the test of time and continue to captivate readers, then I consider that a legacy worth cherishing. Sir Arthur, thank you for sharing your remarkable journey with us today. It's been an honor. The pleasure was mine. Thank you for having me. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was found clutching his chest in the hall of Windlesham Manor, his house in Crowsborough, Sussex, on July 7, 1930. He died of a heart attack at the age of 71. His last words were directed towards his wife. "You are wonderful." He was later interred together with his wife. The epitaph on his gravestone in the churchyard reads, in part, "Steel true, blade straight, Arthur Conan Doyle, knight, patriot, physician, and a man of letters." Starting this week, we're adding forgotten history to our podcast. Just something fun and extra to learn about. So, here we go. Born 100 years ago, Cordell Jackson was an American guitarist thought to be the first woman to produce, engineer, arrange, and promote music on her own rock and roll music label. Jackson founded the Moon Records label in Memphis, 1956. Unable to break into the Sun label's stable of male artists, she received the advice and assistance of RCA Records' Chet Atkins in forming this new label to release her music. She began releasing and promoting on the label singles she recorded in her home studio, serving as engineer, producer, and arranger. The artists recorded included her and a small family of early rock and roll, rockabilly, and country music performers whom she recruited from several southern states. Her Moon Records label was the oldest continuously operating label in Memphis at the time of her death in 2004. The 50s Rock on the Moon of Memphis, Tennessee, plus an oddity, a compilation album of the label's 1950s singles, was released on vinyl in the early 1980s and was later sold on compact disc until her death in 2004. She died in Memphis in 2004, age 81. Join us next week as we talk with Lizzie Borden, accused, tried, and acquitted of the axe murders of her parents. Until then, take care.